Ladies and gentlemen, here we are going to the next session, track 7, technology, innovations and safety. Prepare and prevent instead of repair and repent. To steer this track, I would invite Ms. Sandhya Shankar, President Delhi Chapter, to chair this session.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much. So friends, we enter into the track 7 of day 2, and it's all about technology, innovations, and safety. And as the tagline goes, prepare and prevent instead of repair and repent. And every clinical nurse who works with a team, leads a team, relates closely to this tagline. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Dona Prosser, who has contributed almost 3 decades to healthcare and is currently the Chief Clinical Officer at the Patient Safety Foundation of United States of America. Prior to this, Dr. Prosser has held multiple assignments in her healthcare journey, where she works closely with the organizations to improve quality and patient safety, increasing patient engagement in the hospitals, and reducing clinician burnout. She's a fellow in the American College of Healthcare Executives. She is also a board certified nurse executive by the American Nurses Credentialing Center. She's also a recognized patient advocate by the Patient Advocate Certification Board. And last but not the least, she's the proud recipient of the 2021 Robert Alvear's Patient Safety Leadership Award. Over to Dr. Prosser. We are listening. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here today. It is always such a privilege for me to speak with nurse leaders across the globe about what we can do together to improve patient safety. I have a lot of information to share with you and not a lot of time to do it. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to share my screen and we can get started talking about leadership for safety. So let's first talk about what the problem is. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, last year suggested that more than 3 million people are dying every year because of preventable medical error. Now, preventable is a key word here. We all know that there are patients who may receive a medication that they are allergic to, and nobody knew that they had an allergy to that medication. That is not a preventable error. But if a patient has an allergy, it's a well-known allergy, it's documented in the medical record, and the patient received that anyway, that is a preventable medical error. And so that is what I'll be talking about today, solely focusing on. And so last year, the OECD suggested that in developing countries, 1 in 10 patients are harmed during their hospital stay. In low and middle income countries, that number is even higher. We're talking about 1 in 4 patients there being harmed during a hospitalization, and 1 in 24 patients dying as a result on an annual basis. This also has a tremendous economic impact. You can see here in developed countries, it's estimated that 8.7% of expenditures are spent on treating patients after they had a preventable medical event. And this also results in lost productivity. And globally, that means $1.4 to $1.6 trillion on an annual basis is lost because of this. So this is a tremendous global problem, and one that we've known about for a really long time. If you look back to the literature, it actually starts in the 1960s, folks looking at preventable errors that were happening in hospitals. But it really started to take traction in the 90s. And Lucian Leape is credited with being the father of quality and safety improvement. And in 1994, he was really the first person to quantify it and to compare it to the aviation industry. And he suggested that 180,000 people are dying every year because of medical error. And that means 3 jumbo jets falling out of the sky every other day. And we all know that if that happened, the entire world would take up and stand up and take notice. He also suggested for the first time that these medical errors were because of faulty systems and not because of individual mistakes. So shortly after that, about 5 years later, You may remember this landmark report by the Institute of Medicine, To Err is Human, in 1999. And that report suggested that up to 100,000 patients in the United States are dying every year because of preventable medical error. And now this report focused on errors of commission, meaning that something actually happened. We gave a patient a medication that we shouldn't have, we performed a procedure that we shouldn't have, or something along those lines. And so 5 years later, in 2004, the Institute of Medicine followed that report up with patient safety, achieving a new standard for care. And that's when we began to understand that these medical errors go way beyond things that we actually do. It also includes errors of omission, meaning we didn't give a medication or they didn't receive the procedure that they were supposed to, or errors of communication or context. Those errors are just as deadly and contribute to those many, many patients dying on an annual basis. So for the last 20 years, we have known that this is a huge problem. Everybody's been talking about it for 20 years, and yet we still haven't fixed it yet. So why is that? Why haven't we been able to fix this problem? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. I think first of all, we focused more on process change than we did on culture change. Culture change is really hard. It takes a long time, and sustaining those process changes actually is a lot harder than we expected it to be. As we talked about before with Lucian Leib, we tend to blame people for making mistakes in healthcare rather than examining the system failures that led to them. As a result, the frontline is often afraid to speak up and to admit when errors occur. And, in a lot of cases, especially when, in nursing, nurses don't feel like they are in a position to be able to speak up and to say, and to stop a physician before an error occurs, or to tell somebody that an error did occur when it was created by a physician. Care in healthcare generally remains clinician-centered. We've been talking about patient-centered care for a really long time, but we're not really there. It really is, in pretty much every country in the globe, remains a very clinician-centered business. And that's because the care environment has become extremely complex. It's a lot harder to take care of patients now than it was 30 years ago. And so involving patients and families as equal team members is quite difficult sometimes for folks to do. But of course, then they're not always involved as equal team members because there are some clinicians who don't perceive that that is their role and don't perceive that patients and families should be part of the care team. And then, of course, we have no idea how many people are harmed each year. All of the statistics I told you before are just estimates because nobody's actually counting these errors. And then finally, there's no requirement for healthcare organizations to become highly reliable. So what is high reliability? High reliability organizations are those who can go for a really long time without having any errors. So think about aviation, nuclear power, the oil and gas industry. Those industries are anticipating errors before they occur. In healthcare, we do the opposite. We wait until there was an error that occurred, and then maybe, just maybe, if we knew that it was a problem, we go and we investigate and try to figure out how we can prevent that from happening again. And so this is a great illustration of what I'm talking about, what I'm talking about the work that's been done over the last 20 years. We've been really focused on what I call those population-specific improvements. And so, what I mean by that are we're doing things to reduce CLABSI, to reduce CAUTI, to reduce pressure ulcers and falls in hospitals. But we're doing all of that population-specific work without having a solid foundation for safe and reliable care. And here at the Patient Safety Movement Foundation, we believe that there are three critical components to having that foundation of safety and reliability. The first is having a person-centered culture of safety, followed by a holistic continuous improvement framework where the right hand knows what the left hand is improving. And then finally, an effective model for sustainment, so that we can make sure that all of the hard work that we put into creating change actually sustains over time. And so there's a lot that the nurse leader can do to improve this and to create these foundations of safety and reliability in hospitals and in healthcare across the continuum. First of all, nurses are natural leaders in patient safety. Florence Nightingale is credited with being the mother not just of nursing, but also of quality and safety. We're holistic practitioners. We look at the patient from head to toe and examine their spiritual, physical, and emotional needs. And we also provide the majority of care. We are there to see the fragmented systems and the processes. We know what the problems are in healthcare. And we also think naturally in terms of continuous improvement. You know, we talk a lot these days about conceptual frameworks and improvement. So you may have heard the terms PDSA, DMAID, PDCA. There are a lot of different acronyms out there that can be applied to a performance improvement framework. But really, it's all the same thing as the nursing process: assess, diagnose, plan, implement, and evaluate. And that, of course, is predicated upon the scientific method. So we've been doing this for our entire careers. We know how to problem solve. We know how to fix this problem. And so here at the Patient Safety Movement Foundation, we believe that we can absolutely get to zero. We can absolutely create these sustainable systems in healthcare. And so our vision is that we're going to achieve zero preventable harm and death across the entire globe by 2030. And our mission is to urgently unify people and collectively improve patient safety across the globe. And so we do that in a lot of different ways, but most specifically, there are three things that we focus on here at Patient Safety Movement Foundation. The first is that we forge global relationships, partnerships, and collaboratives to actively promote change for patient safety. So we know we can't do this by ourselves. Everybody has to be involved in creating change in healthcare. And so our goal is to have every healthcare organization in the world commit to high reliability and commit to zero. We also develop and disseminate patient safety education to everybody, to governing bodies, to healthcare professionals, students, patients, families. We have all kinds of free educational information available so that we can together solve this problem. And then finally, we know that we're never going to get to the point where we have as safe and reliable systems in healthcare as we do in aviation and nuclear power unless the public demands it, because it's been going on for years and years and years, and yet we haven't fixed it yet, mostly because the public doesn't even know that this is a problem. So again, I think that there's a lot that nurse leaders can do, and especially the Association for Nurse Executives in India. I'm so excited to partner with all of you, and I hope that you will join the Patient Safety Movement Foundation. There are lots of great information available for you on our website, and there are some very specific things that you can do. You can, first of all, download and implement what we call our actionable patient safety solutions, or our apps. Our apps include three components. These are our apps blueprints, our apps educational resources, and our apps virtual coaching. Our blueprints are an evidence-based summary of the best practices out there on the top 50 topics in healthcare. So these include an executive summary, a leadership checklist, a clinical workflow, and a performance improvement plan to help you and your teams walk through improvement in those topics. We also provide educational resources. You'll find routine webinars, free videos and interviews and articles and blogs on our website. Again, all of this information is available at patientsafetymovement.org for free. And then the third component of our actionable patient safety solutions is our virtual coaching. We know that it's really easy for me to just hand you some information and say, here, go make this happen. The hard part is actually implementing it in practice. And so for those organizations who are committed to zero, we'll provide virtual coaching to your performance improvement teams for free. We'll walk them through an entire PDSA process. We'll help them to collect the data, to analyze their current state, to create process maps and identify where their gaps are, to be able to prioritize and plan for what they're going to do to improve. We'll walk them through the implementation process and the evaluation process. And then hopefully through that, they will learn how to do performance improvement and use the train the trainer approach to go teach other leaders. As I mentioned, this product is free for organizations who make a commitment to zero. So please encourage your executive team to do that. It's very easy to do. All we ask in return for making a commitment to zero and partnering with the patient safety movement is that organizations share their serious safety event data with us once a year. And in return, again, get not only that free virtual coaching, but also access to our our performance improvement workshops, and our leadership development workshops. Another thing that you can do is join an APPS work group. All of our actionable patient safety solutions blueprints are written by our content matter experts across the globe. So if you have a passion about a particular topic, please join one of our work groups. We can use all of the help that we can get. You can also volunteer to become a Patient Safety Movement Foundation ambassador. Our ambassadors are out there, again, talking to people across the globe, sharing our resources, letting them know that we are here to help, and also just getting other people to commit to zero and sharing ideas through our shared learning network of how we can all learn from each other to improve. And then finally, join us for our events. Our next upcoming event is the Unite for Safe Care event. It's becoming an annual event now on World Patient Safety Day, which is September 17th, 2021. The World Health Organization has named this the year of maternal child safety. So we're going to be doing a lot to celebrate what we have done and what we can still do to improve safety across the globe, and specifically in maternal child safety on that day. Lots of other events too, so please check our website and you can find out more information about how you can join in. So if you have any questions, want to know more information about us, please visit us at patientsafetymovement.org. You can also contact me directly. My email address is donna.prosser@patientsafetymovement.org. So thank you so very much for having me today. I am really excited to be able to have a wonderful future partnership with ANEI. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Prosser. It was indeed great listening to you. Thank you. And dear friends, now we welcome Ms. Jane Myers. Ms. Jane, who currently serves as a clinical education manager, SCT, and is also the honorary tissue viability nurse at a tertiary oncology setup at Manchester, NHS, United Kingdom. Being proficient at skin safety, she will be sharing her expertise in advanced practices and solutions, focusing on medical adhesive-related skin injuries. So friends, being a very new topic, and of course, a little complex new learning in preventing skin injuries to the patients, please join me in welcoming Ms. Jane. Over to you, Ms. Jane. Thank you.
So thank you very much for joining me on this education session. I'm Jane Mays, the Clinical Education Manager for SCT in the UK. I also have an honorary tissue viability nurse contract at the Christie Oncology Hospital in Manchester. In this short presentation, I would like us to explore best practice in assessment and prevention of medical adhesive-related skin injury, more commonly known as MASI. Throughout this presentation, I will be referring to them as MASI. We are also going to discuss the role innovative dressings can play in the prevention of MASIs. In order to explore the issue of MASI, we need to very briefly recap on the importance of the skin. As I'm sure you're already aware, the skin has 7 layers within the epidermis and the dermis. The skin has a role in protection from external contaminants, such as chemicals, debris, bacteria, or foreign bodies. Impaired skin integrity is defined as an altered epidermis and/or dermis, destruction of the skin layers. When the skin becomes impaired, it is no longer able to withstand mechanical stresses and balance homeostasis or maintain its barrier function. I'd like to think of the skin as bricks and mortar. When the skin is impaired and there's no mortar, then it easily becomes damaged as the cells aren't packed together. So when, for example, a dressing adhesive is removed, skin cells become more separated, resulting in a MASI, a medical adhesive related skin injury. So what exactly is a medical adhesive related skin injury, a MASI? McNichol and colleagues were the first to recognise this as an issue in 2013. They identified it as an alteration in skin integrity characterised by erythema and/or skin damage, including skin tears on or after removal of medical device containing adhesive. Further to that definition, other groups of clinicians started to acknowledge their issue in their own patients. This led to the Skin Tear Advisory Panel in 2018, including a definition. They stated skin tears are traumatic wounds caused by mechanical forces, such as the removal of adhesive. An international consensus panel went one further, and in 2020, they wanted to simplify the definition of MASI and stated it as skin damage related to the use of medical adhesive products or devices such as tapes and wound dressings. This definition allows us to fully understand what MASIs actually are. So let's think now of the causes of MASI. Mechanical skin stripping is probably the main cause of a MASI. So what exactly is that? It is the removal of one or more layers of the stratum corneum, the very top layer of the skin, following the removal of a medical adhesive. Skin stripping can look very shiny on assessment. We will look at the importance of skin inspection in more detail later on in this presentation. So what are the risk groups? Anyone really with a fragile skin is at risk, not just the elderly population. However, they are common in older adults due to the loss of dermal matrix, which is part of the aging process, and dermal thinning because of dehydration. In the elderly, there's less connection between the epidermis and the dermis. Skin potentially has reduced blood supply, less collagen and elasticity, giving it less tensile strength. All these factors make that patient more at risk of developing a MASI. Neonates and children are also at risk due to the immature nature of their skin. After birth, the skin is thought to be 40 to 60% thinner than that of adults. MASI is a risk to neonates as there is a need to secure devices such as feeding tubes and drips. They secure those with tapes, putting them at risk of a MASI. Patients on medication have impaired skin integrity prior to the application of an adhesive. Patients with frequent dressing changes are at risk, and one that I'm very familiar with in my NHS role is oncology patients due to the nature of their skin and factors such as age and cancer-related treatments. Any skin condition that means the skin is dry and flaky can lead to an increased risk. And not forgetting edema. Where there is edema, the skin can generally be tight and shiny. Swelling increases tension or removal of an adhesive dressing. So now we've looked at the patients at risk, let's look at the problem. From this slide, you can see skin damage from fixation adhesive is thought to occur in 50% of cases in treatment of elderly patients. The general consensus, however, in the clinical world is that MASI skin damage isn't recognised and underreported. So the true extent of the problem is really unknown. Our duty to recognise this problem. Because the true extent of the problem isn't fully understood, it makes it really difficult when you are planning and considering strategic changes to practice. So it is important that we are proactive in this area of care. MASIs can have a massive impact on a patient's quality of life, increased pain, impact on well-being, and can lead to treatment dissatisfaction. Also, there is an added increased risk of superficial wound infection, delayed wound healing, and/or scarring. All these can contribute to more clinical visits, increasing the total cost of care. So how can we as clinicians prevent MASIs? It is vital that we encourage all patients to promote good skin health. Simple things such as encouraging patients to prevent the skin from drying out, to keep their skin hydrated, encourage fluid intake and a balanced diet, encourage the use of an appropriate moisturising skin regime. That is absolutely paramount. Also, encourage careful handling of the skin, keeping it clean, making sure it's dry, but instead of rubbing the skin, pat the skin dry. Just simple things to remember. Maintaining skin integrity is everybody's responsibility. We need to keep the skin in the best condition possible to protect it from external threats like medical adhesive. It is important as clinicians we carry out a full holistic risk assessment of MASI occurring in our patients. This needs to be done prior to the application of an adhesive to the skin and at each dressing change. This will hopefully help identify which of the patients are at risk. We need to document that assessment. For example, document why the patient is at risk and the interventions we've put in place to minimise risk. We all the time need to focus on the power of good skin inspection. Look at skin, really be aware of what our patient's skin is like. During a skin inspection, we need to look at the colour. Is it normal for that patient? Is the moisture level right? Temperature, turgor, and fragility of the skin. Any break in the skin increases the risk of a person developing a MASI. Education in prevention of MASIs is so important, not just for clinicians, but also to empower patients, carers, and family members. We all need to understand what MASI is about and have the knowledge on how to prevent them occurring. Look at the patient in this picture. You can see straight away the skin is very fragile. We all care for patients like this. The skin is shouting out at us to be very careful with it. What adhesive can we put on this skin? We need to select an appropriate product to reduce the risk of skin stripping and reduce the risk of a MASI occurring, as these are avoidable harms. Remember that we talked about MASI and we understand what MASIs are, but just as a recap, MASI occurs because the attachment between the skin and the medical adhesive in many dressings is stronger than that between the patient's individual skin cells, causing the epidermal layers to separate, or in some circumstances, the epidermis to detach from the dermis on dressing removal. It is generally agreed that MASI injury is avoidable. So what can we actually practically do? I'm now going to look at the importance of correct dressing selection in reducing the risk of MASI. This will focus on the role of soft silicone adhesive dressings, which can play a part in reducing the risk. I am going to focus on a very innovative range of dressings which contain soft silicone adhesive, the Leukoplast skin sensitive range. These are different to many adhesive dressings. The soft silicone adhesive, which is in contact with the patient's skin, flows intimately over the curves of the skin cells, which increases the area of bonding between the adhesive and the skin. The intimate contact means that the adhesive does not need to be aggressive for the dressing to stay in place, therefore reducing the incidence of damage when it's removed. An observational study by an independent test house was carried out on Leukomed skin sensitive. It found greater than 90% of those participants confirmed a strong adhesion from the product. Greater than 95% confirmed pain-free removal. And greater than 85% stated they hardly even noticed the dressing in place. The Leukoplast skin sensitive has a range of soft silicone adhesive solutions for multiple situations for patients with fragile and vulnerable skin. They aim at reducing the risk of MASI. So let's have a look in a bit more depth at the range. You may be familiar with soft silicone adhesive technology being in fixation tapes, which is also found in Leukoplast skin sensitive fixation. This can be used for securing wound dressings or secondary fixation of medical devices. Leukoplast also has a fixable for wide area fixation. The soft silicone skin sensitive technology is now also available in wound dressings and wound coverings. These are ideally positioned where there is a risk of MASI. This technology is now moving and advancing, so it can be used for all different areas of wound care. Leukomed T+, which is a transparent film and a dressing, can be used to cover superficial cuts, lacerations and minor burns. It has the added value of having an absorbency element for blood and wound fluid. In summary, skin inspection is so important. We need to remember to assess the factors that increase that patient's risk of developing a MASI. Implement prevention strategies like those that we've shared today. Always think everyone is at potential risk of developing a MASI. Products aren't the overall answer. The main focus has to be on education. All skin and wound care education must include MASI awareness and prevention strategies. Remember, MASIs are an underreported issue and a preventable patient harm. Prevention is always better than cure. Thank you for listening to this presentation today, and hopefully you will take away some learning to go and implement into practice.
Thank you, Ms. Dane. It was indeed an enriching session, and I'm sure the participants must have derived lots of learnings and new solutions to the challenges in their hospitals. Thank you very much. As we move to the last speaker of the session, and I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Andris Malik, the founder and CEO of Cognews Estonia, who joins us here in this session. He had been developing digital health solutions since 2008. And the reason for he being here amongst us in this forum, as he has designed and innovated many process improving and process strengthening solutions through technology helping nurses. He and his team have worked closely on point and time of care testing systems and processes, improving patient safety and reducing unwarranted variations in the processes. Dr. Andris has obtained his MTech in engineering in embedded design systems from University of Lenago, Switzerland. He's also an MSc in computer sciences from Tallinn University of Technology, Estonia, and has earned his doctorate from California, San Diego, and of course, done his studies also in University of Electrocommunication from Tokyo, Japan. He's a founding member of Sleep Technology Council with the National Sleep Foundation of USA, and he's an active advisor to several health technology startups. So my dear tech-savvy nurses, and especially the younger ones, are your ears on, minds alert. Let's listen to Dr. Andris.
Should a nurse internalize step by step all the care procedures? Actually, there is an easier way.
So we're tackling the widespread problems of unwarranted care variation, patient safety, as well as staff burnout.
Co-nurse ensures the procedural protocols, guidelines and checklists are followed each and every time by supporting nurses' memory to remember over 300 plus protocols.
And so what we've seen in working with approximately 100 to 150 hospitals globally is that these challenges are faced at every single hospital.
Now, via Bluetooth headset connected to the smartphone, caregivers are guided through each procedure and given a checklist to preclude any deviations.
This application will help them feel more confident in completing their work-related tasks.
Hello everyone, my name is Andris Malik. I'm the CEO and founder of Cognews, which is a digital health company based both out of Estonia and the US. And we've been developing digital health solutions since 2011. And my own background also includes quite a bit of research activities in the field of embedded systems design and test, as well as e-learning solutions. So we've been working with the early standards since 2000 as well. And I've been invited to give a talk about how to better establish trust in the healthcare sector, and namely how to do it for the nursing staff when they're doing their day-to-day practice in the hospitals around the world. and how to best establish that trust, how to deliver that trust, and how to validate that trust. So without further ado, let me jump into my presentation. In today's talk, I would like to focus briefly on the concepts of transforming guidance principles for improved trust, standardization, and delivery at the point in time of care, and from the perspective of the nursing staff. But first, starting out with some background, this is probably not news to anyone in the audience, but as you know, 4 out of 10 patients are regularly affected in care settings through preventable adverse events. And the health systems of today are primarily addressing the problem of unwarranted care variation through creating loads and loads of protocols, guidelines, checklists, and other types of guidance to improve standardization of care. However, more often than not, this type of content is often non-actionable when and where needed, and it's also not accessible to the nurses when they need it the most. And furthermore, what's happening in hospitals all around the world that we've been talking to is that it is basically effectively creating a information overload for the nursing staff. Meaning, if it's an information system sending out that type of information, it's often clogging the already full inboxes of the nurses. And in an attempt to quantify this problem from as recent articles as possible, I focused on 2. One actually published a little bit less than 2 weeks ago, the other one as well in 2021, highlighting the very serious problem of nurse well-being directly linked to the likelihood of making clinical errors, and in another article highlighting how the systematic problems within health systems contribute to that same factor of burnout and poor health both of those need to be fixed. And in effect, when we talk about standardization of guidance for the nursing staff, in essence, we need to look at it from 2 perspectives. One is the transformation of the content that currently is very cumbersome, often noisy, too long, essentially very hard to consume quickly and in a compact manner. So on the right, I've highlighted a simple visual content management system, accessible and usable by every member of the hospital team or the nursing staff, basically providing an easy, intuitive way to create, manage, and distribute instructional content. Also giving back the control over that content back to the staff themselves and the hospital, the local settings, the local experiences, and so forth. And on the left, in order to deliver that content in a meaningful yet compact way, a very simple point of care solution which sports both a visual interface as well as a voice guided interface. So you don't really need to disinfect your hands in order to go and find out how a particular procedure or protocol should be followed. You can control the application with your voice, leaving your hands free to implement the procedure. And the voice guidance will follow the average tempo or your tempo that you have in the past performed when executing this particular procedure. And when creating and distributing the content that I just talked about, it is obviously very important that the end users, meaning the nursing staff, trusts that content. And when transforming it with elements of artificial intelligence or machine learning, and this also applies to the delivery mechanisms of this content that I will talk about just in a couple of slides, it's quite easy to either develop overtrust in the methods and the content themselves, appropriate trust, which is of course our goal, or undertrust. And because a human being, in essence, is really unable to correctly memorize these types of content whenever and wherever needed, complex sequences of rare procedures, and what we have also observed in our day-to-day work with heightened cognitive loads combined with critical circumstances within the hospital, especially in the pandemic mode, it will further mitigate one's performance. And this is eventually leading to deviations from standards and appropriate practice. And with that, obviously, it is contributing to unwarranted care variation as a whole and the related costs for the hospitals. And now briefly getting a little bit more technical on the topic of trust. I guess from our perspective, there are two ways of looking at it. How do you transform the content? How do you deliver it in a meaningful and trustful manner? And artificial intelligence and machine learning obviously is seen as something maybe even overly powerful in terms of dealing with natural language processing, dealing with large chunks of text content and so on. And of course, it's potentially more optimal in terms of speed and relevance. It is at the same time often dependent on messy training and test data, and the data is often biased, confounding by indication. And it does assume testing on multiple independent data sets, which are often hard to acquire. On the other hand, a rule-based approach, it's much more comprehensible. We can always backward trace it, meaning we'll know how a particular system came to the conclusion when it's supporting us with cognitive aids. We can control the cleanliness and the controllability of the input data. We can make the rules, so it's iterative rules development, which omits bias as it is. We can develop collaborative multi-site approaches across hospitals in a region or across hospitals from different continents that we actually have a lot of experience with nowadays already. And it's simply better positioned, we believe, for simpler and or critical protocols. So those are the main takeaways in terms of quantifying trust and choosing the correct methods. And after trust has been established within the content, we can move on to the delivery, which is probably the most interesting part of our research, of our development, and what our customer sites and users are interacting with daily. So in terms of delivering the content in a meaningful way, obviously we need to make sure that we take a number of inputs into focus. So I've listed some of the most relevant ones here on the left, namely the impact of the care deviation itself, how experienced are the particular staff members performing the procedures, how complex is the care pathway that the patient is going through, what are the fatigue and cognitive performance levels of staff members, and then obviously looking at the hospital level, continuous monitoring complication rates, patient-reported outcomes and experiences, as well as the financial metrics. And on the outputs, what do we need from such a system, a trustful, trustworthy system, is obviously a correct frequency of required guidance per particular procedures, also frequency of required spot observations. It's very important to reduce the variability among staff members in this sense. We need to identify the mandatory instances of support, and in some cases, blood transfusion being a good example, we need to probably support every single blood transfusion procedure or protocol with this type of dynamic support. And also the effect of procedural guideline changes. So if something is updated, either on a national level, federal level, local level, we need to know how these changes compare to what was available to the nursing staff in the past. in summary, the vision of transforming both the content itself and the delivery does go much further than just the systems and methods and approaches I talked about. So in order to really change the way of thinking and getting away from centralized silos of guidance, so to speak, and the catalogs that are presented kind of in a top-down manner, what we really advocate for, as I also mentioned in one of the previous points, is the guidance needs to be localized. So it needs to be relevant clinically, culturally, language-wise, appropriate for the settings, the available equipment, and easy to comprehend and manage. The data or the content needs to be open, as well as the consumption of the content or the guidance. We should promote transparency. We should promote best practices wherever we can, while providing hospital to hospital or even clinic to clinic or even particular staff member to staff member comparisons from global data sources, giving us a really international perspective on this. We also need to make sure the local support and cost, meaning large health systems can share quality content to smaller hospitals which might be lacking the same required resources. So it's a localized cost model. And it actually serves anybody in the care loop because the care pathways often are bidirectional in terms of a large regional hospital dealing with a number of rural ones in terms of patient transfers and vice versa. So, and what also important is the avoiding dependency on guidance from just one authoritative source. So there might be many, there might be excellent quality content being generated at a very small hospital in a country nobody has ever heard of. We've seen this happening because with fewer resources, many hospitals actually become much more creative. And this often leads to excellent guidance documents, instructional design, using equipment more efficiently, and so on. And as I mentioned before, we need to increase the transparency. Where is it coming from? Who are the authors? We can easily credit them. And we can credit also any new authors who are contributing to the process. And this leads us to the staff incentives. So what is really at stake for the staff, and how can they be rewarded, at least in terms of crediting their input and user feedback to the existing content, and hopefully participating in creating a lot of new quality, exciting, and usable, consumable content. And with that, we're able to give them a voice which can be recognized and heard globally. And I think even though it's every nurse's core focus just to focus on the patient, if while providing standard care, standard practice of care, other good things come out of it, we all benefit.
Thank you, Dr. Andres. Thank you very much. And I think this is the need today. As the healthcare systems are evolved and we are progressing at a very rapid pace, technology is the one which is actually the fastest key to success. So with this, friends, and having a lot of insights, I don't know about others, I'm going to certainly take these standardized process initiatives to my organization. And with this, coming to the end of this TRACK-7 on technology and innovations, of course, translating into patient safety. Friends, it's time for taking up few quick questions, and we are listening. You may please go ahead.
Yes. So while, as you can see, we have Miss Jane and Dr. Andres with us. Because of certain reasons, Dr. Dona couldn't stay back and take the Q&As, but certainly we'll be more than happy to share her questions, which she can return with the answers. Ms. Jane, we have the first question from our one of very intent and intelligent participants. She has thanked for the great insights you have given into skin integrity. And the question is, in your experience, are nurses in Europe very much aware of this area on MARSI? And are those part of the regular induction and training of nurses?
Thank you so much for that question. Very, very interesting. I'd love to say yes, they are, but sadly, no, the answer is no. It's not a standardized part of the induction training. I strongly believe it needs to be. It's very dependent on the organisation. So some organisations do educate on MARSI, some don't. However, as in my presentation we looked at, it's underreported here in Europe, and it is a patient harm. It is something that is avoidable with best practice. So we do need to really start integrating it into all elements of education. Skin assessment and holistic assessment features very highly, which is equally as important when you're considering the bigger picture and which patients are at risk. So yes, in answer to the question, it's not in every induction training, yet it should be. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you very much. And of course, in India as well, it is actually an emerging field. But I would say the developed tertiary and quaternary setups have started to look into this very seriously. And there in those setups, it has started to figure as a very important nursing quality indicator. So it's a practice outcome indicator actually in the hospitals as well.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. I think once it's recognised and it's reported, and it's then you're able to put in strategies for prevention and identify patients at risk. So that's excellent to hear, and it's definitely something here in Europe that needs to escalate through. It is an avoidable harm, so we need to safeguard our patients from that harm.
Yes, I'm sure we are going to do a good job. So Dr. Andres, I come to you now with first a compliment from one of the participants. Very interesting questions for you. And so it's a expression of gratitude on the interesting solution you have raised on upskilling and standardizing nursing procedures. And so the question is, when nurses use Bluetooth, will there be interference with other equipments like monitors?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. So nowadays, Bluetooth has been completely shielded from this type of interference. So we have not gathered any evidence of that happening in the practice. Also, our application itself actually is able to run standalone. So if there is interference within the Wi-Fi or the cellular network, that also does not affect the real-time operation of the platform. So we're completely good there. And also the participants or the users can actually use the platform with a wired headset or simply through the visual interface. So we have all these options available.
Okay, all right. That's another thing which comes to my mind, and somebody has put it rightly here. Using such solutions does give the impression to a patient to perceive the nurses as a non-confident nurse.
Yes, we do get that question from sometimes from patient populations who are experiencing, let's say, mild or moderate dementia, for instance. So in their eyes, they can see the nurse turning into a robot, talking to a machine. But in reality, actually the platform or the application is there to protect everybody in the care loop. And normally if that question arises, then a simple sort of an informative just sentence or kind of a paragraph will do that it really is there to protect everybody in the care loop and to actually increase not just the confidence, but patient safety. Let's say if we're talking about critical, complex and rare procedures, which don't come around that often, then it will help everybody. And in our case, it is actually usable as well outside the hospital. so the family members or patients can actually be using it confidently themselves.
Very nice. Very, very well said, I would say. One more interesting question for you, Dr. Andres. As automation complacency may lead to the healthcare professional totally trusting the output of these technologies, and that's what we do, and they may stop verifying through their skills and knowledge. What is your take on this, and how much should we trust an AI or a machine learning in healthcare?
That's a great question. So
Yeah.
I've been reading probably thousands of pages in the past 6 months, especially on this topic. And our approach actually has been more towards rule-based than AI taking over. So with the rule-based approach, at least you can explain why a particular recommendation has come to the end user or the nurse. And the thing we have adopted actually is more of a blended approach. So we support peer-to-peer kind of spot observations, comparisons, sharing experiences, but also giving feedback to what the application is telling you to do. So you can actually give feedback, and then that feedback can be analyzed by your peers and then accepted or rejected. And you will be completely credited if you wish for that feedback. So it's almost like a crowdsourcing type of, let's say, creation or assembly of some of the guidance.
Yeah, I think this should give an insight for us as well to be more attentive and trust your skills and intuits. Thank you, Dr. Andres. Thank you. And Ms. Jane, I have my friend Glory putting up a very nice question for you, saying it was really an eye-opener and awesome session. Thank you. Kindly recommend few methods to identify the skin integrity and identify the type of adhesives that can be used in tertiary setup. So mainly it's to few methods on identifying the skin integrity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for such a great question. So skin assessment is so important, and it is literally just getting everybody. Skin is everybody's priority within our patients. So it's being very vigilant and observing what the skin actually is doing. It's talking to you, it's telling you what the problems are. So it's about looking at the moisture within the skin, the turgor, the texture, you know, the color, is that normal? How's it feeling? How thin is that skin? But ultimately trying to promote skin integrity through our discussions with our patients. So obviously good hydration of the skin, good nutrition. So it's all about maintaining skin integrity through our assessments. And it is about looking and feeling skin, and is that normal? Is that patient's normal? Because obviously our skin is all so different amongst us, but largest organ of the body needs the most care. So I think it's about implementing good skincare into every patient's care plan. I talk a lot about the need to wash skin, keep it nice and clean, dry skin by patting the skin, not rubbing to cause trauma to the top layer of the skin, and obviously a moisturizer, and moisturize the skin with an emollient. And obviously the best emollient is the one the patient will use. So it's no good in the drawer where they're not using it. So we all have our own personal preferences to what we like. So as long as it's an emollient that the patients are happy to use, those three things alone will increase skin integrity.
All right. That's I think too basic, not forgetting the basic principles.
Absolutely.
And you learn in the first year of nursing, and just always to practice the same. So the last question, I would say, viewing the timeline, I'll just take the last question, which is actually a subset of the one which you have just answered, but it is quite relevant in Indian setting. That Ms. Jane, how do we maintain the skin integrity in the clients who are at high risk and in the remote hospitals which have limited resources and no advanced products to take care of patients and to prevent them from having any skin injuries?
Absolutely. And that's such a great question. It's awareness, isn't it?
Yes.
It's absolutely awareness of the risk. So it's sort of being aware yourself and knowing that that patient's at risk. We looked at in the presentation at those risk groups. So it's being aware of those, and it's then being able to sort of be very vigilant, doing an assessment prior to applying an adhesive to the skin. So it's all about knowing the patient's skin. But good skincare can happen everywhere. It is literally the basics, like you said. It's the cleaning, drying, emollients, good hydration of the skin, good nutrition. And I know we've just said it before, but that doesn't cost, and it is literally all down to being aware and really pushing that through our patients as well. So empowering them, educating them. It's their skin, they need the education to care for it. So absolutely, the basics are always the best.
Yes, thank you. Quite relevant, I would say. Thank you. And my dear Anne, hope it helps. Don't forget the basics. It's first and foremost assessing the patient very well. And, for high-risk patients, probably an assessment in every shift helps. Maintaining hydration, maintaining good nutrition, fluid and electrolyte balance, and mainly the fluid balance and the skin hygiene are the mantras for preventing any skin injuries to the patients.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
last but not the least in this, education of the patient, that is awareness, which will help them actually helps themselves. And with this, thank you, Dr. Andres. Thank you, Jane. And I would like to extend gratitude to Dr. Prosser. It was a great session, very enlightening and enriching as well. And your friends and my dear participants, we come to the end of track 7 of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.